All right, guys, welcome back. Chad and Sam here. We're going to do a kind of a different format from last week. Last time we did a discussion about the current programming. This time we're going to do a little bit of a background on Coach Sam. Sam and I were talking about some ideas for content that you guys might want to, consume and things you might be interested in hearing about. And we just kind of started with us, like, hey, maybe the members would like to know a little bit more about the coaches. So, and I know a lot about Sam. Sam and I talk every week for at least like 2 hours, and it's
maybe more.
It's maybe more, and it very often takes a very, very meandering path. But we learn a lot about each other in the process. But you guys don't get that chance, so. We're going to basically just talk about Sam and his kind of background prior to CrossFit, his CrossFit endeavors, and then kind of what he's looking towards in the future. So with that, my first question for Sam is basically, what was your high school / kind of collegiate background in athletics, but also maybe academics, things
Collegiate.
Yeah, things that you were just your athletic background.
Yeah. I played like every sport as a really little kid, but I found out really fast that I was mediocre once I got mediocre at best once I got to high school or middle school, really. I was an okay runner. I never really went too far with it. I also went to Shen, which was they're a powerhouse when it
Pretty
comes
tough,
to
yeah.
with basically every sport. I mean, but track and field and cross country especially.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not. You have to be sub 4.5 in a mile. You have to be really moving to be able to be scoring varsity or anything. And I'm not that fast.
Oof.
I think my fastest mile was like 4:44 or something. I think 4:44 was my fastest.
That's still cooking. Like, don't cut yourself short. Nobody.
Yeah, I think any other school I would have been all right,
Yeah.
but like Shen, no way.
Not many people break sub 6, let alone sub 5. So
Yeah.
you're doing all right.
Yeah, it was and that was only one time, but yeah, I played every sport. Through high school I ran cross country, did track a couple years. My favorite event in track was actually steeplechase. I love that. It was
Nice.
super fun. Mostly because you got to like jump.
I get so
in the
nervous
water.
watching those.
Yeah.
YouTube tells me to watch one every now and then, and I can't resist it. But I get so nervous every time they kind of like shuffle their feet and get ready to jump, like they're gonna eat it.
Yeah, I wasn't great at steeplechase. I loved it though. It was super fun.
Seems fun, yeah.
Yeah, and then
We should program one for like a workout.
we could do it with the boxes across the front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
You got to vault the boxes.
What could go wrong?
Well, you should have seen the Spartans last night. I don't know if Tim listens to this, but Tim was doing was doing like a front flip over the walls outside for Spartan class. It was quite amazing. It's quite impressive.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. This is what happens when
Yeah.
we talk. We're gonna get very
A
off
lot of
topic
side
here.
streets.
Yeah. So we have a timeline. We're gonna try to keep it. We're gonna try to keep it here. But anyways, so track and field, cross country, primarily a runner. Never phenomenal at it, but I was okay. I had gotten into CrossFit in high school. So my CrossFit experience goes all the way back to there, and
What year did you graduate?
2008. So
Eight.
quite a while. So I was at the very beginning stages of CrossFit. My brother, it's actually a funny story. Well, not a funny story, but my brother had found it initially through. Probably everybody remembers the movie 300.
Yeah, Jim Jones.
Jim Jones, yeah, Mark Twight, the guy who runs a gym called not a very politically correct name, Jim Jones, but his gym was called Jim Jones, and
Pretty appropriate when you think about Drink the Kool-Aid, right?
yeah, well, that's actually where Drink the Kool-Aid came from, was
Right,
Jim Jones.
right.
So if you ever heard the phrase in the CrossFit world, "Drink the Kool-Aid," it's from a guy named Mark Twight, who did the training for the actors in the movie 300, the movie about the Spartans.
You can go look at that video on YouTube today. It still gets me fired up about training. It's great.
Yeah, so he was the original one, and we were like, we ended up finding CrossFit through that, or my brother did.
It's so funny that was your like inception story, because that was like the first time I ever heard about it.
Yeah.
I didn't get into it until several years after that, but I kept bumping up against it and being like, what is this? Like, what are these guys doing? They're like kind of like swinging on the pull-up bar. Like, that looks really impressive, but also like I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that was like what we did first, and just kind of went from there. And I've always come on and off CrossFit throughout the past. What is that like? So that would have been like
13 years.
15 years. So 2005 was when.
Oh, from 5?
From 5, because that's when 2005, 2006 was when we first found CrossFit.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But yeah, I've always kind of come on and off it from there. Yeah, so that's my athletic background. I mean, mediocre athlete, not the greatest.
But you've also dabbled since then. Since you've gotten into CrossFit, you've dabbled in a lot of different things. So that's not the extent of your athletic background. It's your pre-CrossFit athletic.
Yeah, that
background.
would be like high school and collegiate. Not that I ever played any sports in college.
So what did you do after high school?
I went to the Navy. So
the Navy?
so I pretended to go to college for a month, realized it wasn't for me,
Which is funny because now you're kind of like perpetually in college.
Yeah. Well, I've got a reason for that too.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that. We can talk about that later. But I went to college. I pretended to go to college for a month. Definitely wasn't for me. Ended up joining the Navy. Did some stuff in there, and actually that was my first real experience with coaching. Was when I got to my final duty station, or where I was going to be, where I was stationed. I ended up taking on the role of what they call a command fitness leader. So I ended up running our PT sessions and stuff like that,
nice.
Organizing the training. And actually one guy who I was in the Navy with, Joe Subia, he also did CrossFit. So him and I were the two people who were in charge of our command's fitness. And everybody hated us in the sense that we would make them do really, really terrible workouts. And CrossFit, for lack of a better put it. And we weren't allowed to call it CrossFit because the Navy, at the time, I don't know if they've relaxed it since then, but they were really very much against CrossFit, which is funny because CrossFit was originally a bunch of Navy SEALs working out at Glassman's gym in Santa Cruz.
For those that don't know, this is a little bit of a side street, but relevant. A lot of CrossFit came from not just the Navy, but different branches of the military, where people had kind of got wind of the .com site and would start to kind of like corral a few buddies to do it, and like the Army weight room or whatever. And there's a really good book if you guys are interested in more of kind of the CrossFit book of Genesis. It's called Learning to Breathe Fire.
Yeah.
And
Greg Amundsen's thing, or is that?
Yeah, he's in it. I don't think he contributes to it, but it's not his book.
Okay.
No. Or maybe it is. Actually, it is.
Is it?
I don't have to fact check that, but I did read it several years ago. It is kind of like a book of Genesis in that it's a collection of stories about how CrossFit kind of came to be, with Greg Amundsen, obviously some Glassman stories, Christmas Abbott, and the guy that started CrossFit Old Town, which I believe was the first East Coast CrossFit gym. There's just a lot of really cool kind of like tribal knowledge of how CrossFit came to be. Very different than what we all know CrossFit to be now. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very different. Anyway, so you kind of had almost this quintessential like OG CrossFit military experience, which is really the root of how it came to be. Shy of going to Santa Cruz and working out in Greg Glassman's gym.
Yeah, we were actually the rings probably aren't up there anymore, but me and my brother made our own equipment growing up because you couldn't buy a lot of stuff. Or if you could buy it, it was really, really cheap. Like
Rogue didn't exist yet.
Rogue didn't exist. They didn't exist until 2008 or 9, and then they were literally selling jump ropes out of their garage. Bill Henniger's garage was like one T-shirt that they made and a jump rope, and that was it.
And that's one of the stories in the book is how Rogue came to be.
Yeah.
J.C. Hurt just did the fact check here. Is the guy that wrote it. Greg Amundsen is one of the. He's mentioned a number of times in there. Oh, one of the stories in there I have to throw out there is. Nicole Carroll. Mm-hmm. You guys all probably know Nicole Carroll from her announcement video tips for the Open. One of the greatest stories from that book is the experience of her struggling through the Amanda.
Mm.
It's
one of my favorite workouts.
Squat snatches and it might be a different workout. It had muscle ups in it. I think it was Amanda. And anyway, it took her like 20 minutes to do. She's like crying at the end, but like just her perseverance and her work ethic in that was like, it gives you goosebumps when you kind of learn the backstory of it, and then you go watch that video on YouTube. It's like a 2006 YouTube video, so it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
But anyway, we digress. So in the Navy, doing CrossFit.
Yep.
And
so that was like my first real coaching experience. In the Navy.
So how many guys did you have like working out with you at once?
So we were a smaller group, but I mean smaller group in the grand scheme of the military. But we would it depended on who was in town, so to speak, for at the time. But we would have sessions of either like between like 20 up to 40 people. That would be like the top end.
That's a good sized class.
Yeah, so it's a pretty group. I mean, it doesn't run. It's a far cry from what we do here, because it had to be. You have certain guidelines that you have to meet anyways. So you have to run it a certain way, and by and large, people are autonomous in that stuff. And you're.
So you were like showing them something like, hey, let's figure out how to power clean. Like, here's what it looks like.
Yeah,
let's try it.
We never taught the Olympic lifts. We would do like a lot of just body weight stuff where you don't get the equipment, especially where I was stationed in I was over in Connecticut, and it's a really wonderful place if you ever want to go visit it. Don't go visit it. You go to Mystic. Mystic is really nice. It's right next door. But anyways, we would never teach them how to like power clean. We really didn't use weights much. We would do a lot. It was mostly body weight workouts. And you would do some stuff at the beginning, and then you'd have people go off and do their own thing afterwards if they wanted to lift weights or whatever. So that was largely what we would do. It's just that kind of stuff.
When did you kind of come out of that? Like, what year would that have been?
So I got out of the Navy in 2012.
And then that's around when you started at CrossFit Clifton Park?
Yeah, so I initially, I remember when I was in high school, I remember when Albany CrossFit opened up. And 2007 was when they opened. Because they opened up the same year that not many people know about this place. There's one person who knows, and I don't know if he's going to watch this or not, but Jeff Ewing knows. And he was actually, if you guys know Jeff Ewing, he might hate it if I say this, but he's one of the like OG CrossFit people in this area. He went to CrossFit Saratoga.
Yeah.
Not CrossFit.
Not Farrell.
Not Farrell, not 12866, not Soulshine. He went to CrossFit Saratoga, which is literally out of some guy's garage up in Saratoga and over in Boston Spa, really. So they opened those two opened the same year. And anyway, so I remember CrossFit Albany opening up in 2007, kind of following them and seeing at the time, it was like I was a high school student, I couldn't afford it, whatever. So I got out of the Navy, came back. They had two locations at that point, Albany CrossFit and CrossFit Clifton Park. So I ended up at some point going over to CrossFit Clifton Park and signing up and getting that. I think that was like my third or fourth gym I belonged to at that point, because I'd been in a few gyms while I was in the Navy too. So
CrossFit gyms or
CrossFit gyms, yeah. So
cool. And then you were there until you basically opened up Round Lake.
Yeah, so I was there I initially was there as a member for a little bit, and it was pretty soon thereafter I started going there as a member that I got my CrossFit Level 1.
Where'd you do your Level 1?
Rogue.
At Rogue?
Nice. Yep, at their headquarters in Ohio. That was a cool experience, because I had, it was nice because if you get it regionally, if you get your Level 1 regionally, you get the same people as everybody else in that region. So I went to Ohio, and at the time they were actually sending the Level 1 staff, the seminar staff, to travel. So they didn't have these regional teams anymore, or they didn't have the regional teams yet. They had just traveling staff, and they sent them all over the world. And this was when it was like OGs who just were at the CrossFit Games.
Right.
So I had Nadia Shatila, who a lot of people won't even remember her. You don't really see her anymore. Who consequently is actually was my brother's CrossFit coach for a while over in Seattle. She runs used to run a really cool gym called CrossFit Belltown. They had a whiskey bar in the gym.
Yeah.
Super cool gym.
I never worked out there. When we were in Seattle, I walked by there, and it's a really cool place.
Yeah, it's super cool. That's where I did my Level 2. Actually, was at her gym.
Nice.
But I had Matt Chan.
They were one of the first like 10 affiliates, weren't they?
I think it's something like that. They were one of the really early ones. Yeah. Seattle actually had quite a few. They have one of the first affiliates. I can't remember what it's called, but they had one.
I thought it was Belltown, but maybe it's like.
There's a number of them over there. They're like right there with San Francisco CrossFit, which shut down unfortunately. Yeah. So I was at CrossFit Clifton Park for a little bit, and then ended up opening this gym. Several years back, 2015. 2014 was when we initially started running it, and then getting into the idea of actually doing it, and then ended up doing it.
Yeah, I remember, I think the first time I ever met you, I didn't really it was very much just just crossing paths, was you came over to our Gilderland location, Aevitas, down Gilderland, and you were picking Dean's brain on some programming stuff. That was way back. That was like when Dean was still with us, which was 2014, summer like 2014 timeframe. And that was the first time you and I kind of crossed paths, but we didn't really get to know each other until we came up for, I think the first time we came to Round Lake was we brought a team to compete in the Toys for Tots.
Yeah, that was December of 2015, the first year we opened.
That was the first year you guys were open?
That was the first competition we ran. Brian Cloud broke his ankle.
We, I think it was like me, it was Kelsey.
He didn't break his ankle, he just hurt it.
Me, Kelsey, Dave, and Jess, Jess Knight, and the four of us did that team comp. It was fun. We had a blast. It was the first time I ever did a team comp. I think it was actually the first time I ever did any competition.
Yeah.
It was super good time. But then the second time we met was for the liftoff. Came up here for the Round Lake liftoff. I think a year or two later, 16 or 17.
When did you guys do your mock meet? Because you guys did a mock meet down at Gilderland.
Yeah, you came down for that. That's right.
I brought a group of people down there.
You brought a bunch of lifters down to the mock meet, which was 2016, the summer of 2016.
Yeah, because that was when Ray Brunk was still in the area coaching.
Yep.
That was a fun little meet.
Brett helped out quite a bit.
Yep.
That was a great. We had I want to say we had 35, 40 people lift in that meet.
Yeah, I see that picture pop up on my newsfeed every now and then, and or those pictures, and there was quite a big crowd, especially for back then.
We had about 10. I want to say we had about 10 or 12 lifters from Gilderland, and we honestly didn't really expect much. We just kind of casually opened it up to the other gyms, and we're amazingly surprised by it. But anyway, and then I came up here and competed in the liftoff that you guys ran, which was max snatch, max clean jerk, and
the lovely 6-minute AMRAP.
The 6-minute AMRAP we just repeated recently. And I'm pretty proud of how I did in that. I podiumed in that, and I was looking at the list that you said.
Second, yeah.
No, I thought it was third.
Did Jake beat you?
I think
it would have been Chris Anderson.
Chris and Jake were ahead of me, and then I think I was third.
Yeah, because Jake really crushed the lifts.
He did, and Chris had us on Sinclair because his body weight.
Sinclair, and then Chris.
He smoked the workout.
Annihilated the workout. He was the only one.
Hey, I'm very proud of at least keeping up with him and keeping it respectable.
You did 21 burpee box jump overs, which is incredible considering how far you have to move.
And he finished all 30, right? There was a 25. Okay, so he was only 4 reps ahead of me, and he got back to the assault bike.
He touched the bike. That's what he did. He touched the bike.
So he was probably 20 seconds ahead of me. And if you guys don't know Chris Anderson, one of the nicest guys in the world, but also one of the fittest. What's he in now? 40?
Yeah, he was.
He's a Masters athlete. He's been to the games as a Masters athlete. Yep. He's the leanest person I've ever met, but he's also equally as nice. So to even hold a candle to him in that workout was great. He was probably just coasting, but
I don't know. He looked pretty beat after that. I'm not going to give him that one. He looked pretty beat up.
I think that was the first time I ever voluntarily did 50 unbroken thrusters in a workout, just because you just don't put it down. Yeah. Anyway, that was I think the last time. The only time after that I really remember kind of seeing you prior to us really going down this crazy past couple of years of combining the gyms, and was you brought Alyssa down. You brought Alyssa down to Gilderland to lift in a different environment because she was getting ready for University Nationals.
Yep, University Nationals.
So, and then that, anybody here that knows Alyssa and anybody that doesn't know Alyssa, you need to know her. She's equally one of the nicest human beings on the planet, and a complete powerhouse.
Cleaned 190 off the blocks.
Cleaned 190 off the blocks yesterday at what's her fighting weight right now?
Probably 55
kilos.
So 100. That's 120 pounds or so.
At 120 pounds, she's cleaning 190.
Yeah.
So
and she got more in her.
Yeah.
Definitely got more in her.
So that was my first experience with Alyssa. I'm pretty sure Alyssa wrote me a thank you card for letting me use the gym.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is this girl? This girl is amazing. And then from that point on, actually, that's when Round Lake really started to skyrocket from 2017 to 2019.
Yeah.
And then in early 2019. There was some kind of fallout that occurred within the community.
We don't need to go into that.
We're not going to get into that. But you and I crossed paths again, and I essentially said, Sam, let's work together, man. We always, anytime we would meet in for competitions or whatever, we always kind of clicked. We think very similarly.
And we had communicated through the over the internet quite a bit, over through Facebook and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
just stayed in
throughout the
touch.
years, just going back and forth and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I wouldn't. It's not like I was coming up here or anything like that. Like we would still.
Well, there was a few times I remember going down there to lift too.
Yeah, you guys came down to lift
and
a couple
you came
times.
up here once or
I
twice.
did come up once to lift. I don't remember why. Oh, I think it's because I was like selling you barbells or something. Like I had extra bars or something.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was actually our 15-pound bars. We bought those.
Yeah,
from you.
yeah.
We've never bought fun fact. We've never bought 15-pound bars new here. We've always just bought them from Chad.
You acquired them.
We acquired them from Chad.
Yeah.
So
because we had 10.
bars.
We had 10 of them when we first opened. We had 10, and I think we had 5 25-pound bars. So
they found their way back to you.
They did. Yeah.
There we go.
That's really all this has been about the whole time.
The 15-pound technique bars.
We acquired Round Lake just so we could get our technique bars back. No. And then in 2019, we decided that we saw we had shared enough kind of vision on the path forward in the fitness community, and felt like we should start working together. And you actually started coaching for us down in Guilderland before we officially kind of bought Round Lake,
right?
And then I think it was like first week of June we bought Round Lake, and it was finalized. You were coaching a little bit at Saratoga Barbell at that time, up there with Kevin and some of his group.
Yep. Kevin and
Darren, yeah. And then that summer things started to kind of, I don't want to say normalize, because we were still very much trying to figure out how to run 2 gyms at once.
Right.
We acquired some people, and then the pandemic hit.
Right.
And ever since we've been just trying to keep our head above water.
Right, yeah.
So now the more kind of interesting part of this conversation that I want to know more about, and I think that the members are going to want to know more too, is, and maybe we didn't really touch on this, but while you've been a CrossFit coach, you've done a lot, not only to dabble athletically from doing a triathlon, the half Ironman, right?
I've done 2 half. Well, I've done 2 halves, attempted 1, done a full.
Done a full. The Lake Placid one?
So I've done Lake Placid half. That was a really fun one, and that's a whole nother story. And if you know, you know. Mont Tremblant full.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I did Syracuse half, and then I attempted Tupper Lake Tin Man, but I got in the water. The Tin Man's a funny story, because I got in the water. I cramped up in the water, which had never happened before. And I'm a very comfortable...
When you say cramp, you mean lungs or legs or what?
Calves. So like my calf on my right leg cramped right up, seized up. And if you ever had cramps in water before, and like a foot cramp or a calf cramp in the water, it's abysmal, and you don't want to do anything. It's horrendous. And so it wasn't releasing. I tried to get to release. It wasn't releasing. So I ended up pulling out literally within like the first 200-300 meters of the race. I mean, the water was choppy too, and I'm like, I'm not gonna try to swim this 1.2 miles in choppy and really terrible conditions, and with my leg cramped up, it's not releasing. I'm not gonna try to risk it. So I got out, and then I tried to do the bike. And up till that point, the farthest I'd ever ridden a bike, I had gotten this bike. It's the one that's in the office right now. I bought the bike off a member, Shane Catula, and I had got it fitted on Wednesday. So I'd never ridden a road bike that was fitted for me or had clip-ins before. So I never, ever have ridden one before. And I had my race on Saturday, yeah. So I was about to do 56 miles, never having ridden a bike more than maybe 10. So I got out of the water, got on the bike, started riding, totally realized my mistake early on. By mile 20, I was just dying on it. I finished the bike, but totally defeated by the end of it. So it was a horrible race. So that's my attempted half Ironman, the first one I tried. And then I decided to get smart and actually train for it, which was a good idea. Yeah. And the rest is history from there. I did half Ironman Syracuse, which is horrible. So hot that day, but I did great. Finished. Then we did Mont Tremblant, which was a phenomenal race. If you ever want to do an Ironman or a half Ironman, I recommend that race. It is such a good race.
Is it just because you're so far north? It's cooler.
No, it's just sort of that, but it's in August. I mean, we had a near perfect weather day for weather, but it's just such a good course. You're in basically a ski village for skiing, so everything's right there. Yeah. I stayed right at there's a hotel or a resort at the very top that you can gondola down to the start line.
Nice.
So I literally I got up in the morning, got on the gondola, rode it down to the start line, started the race, right? So, but that's a phenomenal race. Jeff Andritz is doing it
This
coming
summer,
year.
right?
This summer, yeah, he's doing it this summer. So that's the race he's doing. But yeah, and then Lake Placid half, I did that one, 2019. And
That was when that was the summer 2019.
Yeah,
right?
so that was the one where I actually I'm pretty sure I gave myself some type of adrenal fatigue.
And that
overtrained
one
completely.
you also decided to do. Didn't you do a Spartan?
Yeah, I did the Spartan Ultra Beast the following weekend.
The
So I
next
did
weekend.
half Ironman, and this was my mistake here. Spartan or half Ironman into I don't recommend doing this. Half Ironman on a Sunday, 6 days later, going to Killington to do the Spartan Ultra Beast, which is 34 miles. Well, that one was about 34 miles.
Ultra Beast is 34 miles.
Yeah.
Of trail running and obstacles.
Yeah, so you're going it was about I'm going off people's watches. I didn't have a watch or anything like that, but people were saying it was about 33 to 35 miles, something like that. Everybody's watch read different.
Sure.
And then about 14,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah, because it's going up and down quite a bit.
Yeah, it was 70 degrees at the bottom, and my hat was freezing to the top of my head at the summit. So it was.
Wow.
It was quite the race. It was fun one.
So but you've also competed in weightlifting.
Yeah, if you could say that, yeah.
Well, you have.
Attempted.
Yeah. So, what else? You've dabbled in CrossFit competition?
Yeah, I did.
I mean, you've done the Open every year, you can remember, right? For the most part.
Yeah, whether or not I've submitted scores is another story. I've done
Yeah.
it. I always do the open workouts. Weightlifting, yeah. CrossFit competitions. I've done a few of them. I did one very casually with CrossFit. I just go there to have fun with them. I did one a while ago, and then I think the most recent one was we did one down at CrossFit Spur. They had one. They had it was a fundraiser one, and we ended up doing it. And Alex Grignon was my partner, and we ended up winning it.
Nice. Just casually.
Casually,
Yeah.
yeah. It was fun.
Good.
It was a good competition.
So the other thing, kind of in process has been your continued emphasis on coaching education. And those of you guys that don't know, Sam is one of the few level 3 CrossFit coaches in the area. But besides that, even, you're very well versed in a lot of other coaching certifications, whether it's CrossFit. I know you did kettlebells, CrossFit kettlebells, right?
Yep.
But you've also done a lot of certs and are actually currently in a course that's outside of the kind of CrossFit sanctioned stuff. One for CEUs and 2 for just getting more experience. Do you I don't know if you want to just give us the highlights of your kind of coaching education background. Sure. till now, and then we can kind of transition into what's ahead.
Yeah, so I've always been, so I guess the biggest thing that's kind of I've done outside of with CrossFit, I've done the standard path, level 1, level 2, and then I got my level 3. So I've kind of been following that. I've been waiting for them to open up the level 4, and I would have gotten that already if they had it, but they haven't. So I think they just opened it. I got to look at it and see what it entails, but I'll probably go get that one as soon as I can. Anyway, so outside of CrossFit, I've done a number of different things. I've done a couple of the CrossFit certifications. Kettlebells is one of them. I think that's the only other CrossFit certification I've ever done.
But you've also done some USA weightlifting.
Yeah, so outside of CrossFit, I've gone through the pipeline in terms of USA weightlifting. So my USA weightlifting cert, I got back probably within 6 months to a year after I got my level 1. And then I went on to get my weightlifting level 2. And then I ended up earning my national coach certification in 2019.
And that's merit-based. You have to actually coach an athlete to a national level meet.
Yeah, so for the USA national coach, it's changed over the years, but you have to be level 1, level 2, and then there's a athlete they refer to it as an athlete production requirement. And you have to send X amount of athletes to these particular meets, and it's not like going to a local meet. You have to send them to a national meet. So, and really the only ones that count are nationals, university nationals, AO finals, and senior nationals. Junior nationals as well.
Masters nationals.
Masters nationals does not count, or maybe they just changed it. I think they changed it, but the thing with like Masters nationals, I remember there was a brief time where they had this. You had to have like 24 athletes who you've made there.
For those that don't know, Masters in weightlifting starts at what, 35?
35, yeah.
Which I think it does now in CrossFit too, right?
Yeah, so that's actually a call out across the board in terms of like Olympic sports. So like the thing that's pretty standard.
So junior is up to what, 18?
Junior's 17 and below.
17 and below, and then 18 to...
Sorry. Youth is 17 and below. Junior is 18 to 20. 20, and then 21 and beyond is considered senior.
And university nationals is up to 25?
25, yeah.
And then...
Or no, university is up to 30, excuse me. And then they have U25s, which is under 25 nationals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that U25 also university, or is it just U25?
Under 25.
Yeah, okay.
U25. So it's it's just another way. I could see USAW getting rid of that at some point because they
seems like a lot of layers, but
it's they did it in an attempt to open up the competition space for people to get more experience. Because if you've never coached anybody at a national meet before, it's a little bit different than coaching at a local meet. So they were getting I know USA Weightlifting was getting a lot of people who were coming from the CrossFit world and didn't have any experience coaching at a real, I'll air quote that, a real meet before. And it's again, it's a little different. There's a lot more.
Local meets in general can be very, we'll call it loosely run.
Right, and there's much more pomp and circumstance, and there's a few more rules that you have to abide by at a national meet as a coach and as an athlete. So a lot of people were coming in, not getting it, so they had to try to figure out a way to bridge that gap. And they did that with the American Open Series now. So Series is a lot like a low-grade national meet now, where people can get a lot more experience.
So when it comes to weightlifting and in the grand scheme of things for you, it's definitely an area of focus that it lends itself to teaching groups, teaching CrossFit. The way that you would go about teaching and running a weightlifting class isn't necessarily the same as you would teach weightlifting to a group of CrossFitters, but would you say that your kind of bias is towards weightlifting? Like it seems like you genuinely enjoy your weightlifting kind of participation as a coach. It's almost like your dessert, like you're a coaching dessert.
For sure, I definitely do. And really anything that's skill based, I enjoy. I would say you could put a generalization on it and say skill based. And weightlifting is very clear cut in what the goal is, right? And you have technically 3, but really 2 lifts, 2 competition movements, snatch and clean and jerk. So
it's pretty accessible for most people.
Right, very, very, very easy, very low barrier to entry. But you
don't need like parallel bars or the ability to, like gymnastics, for example, is a much higher barrier to entry.
Yeah, to get proficient at gymnastics, to compete in a gymnastics setting, there's a lot that has to happen. There's a lot longer run up. Whereas in weightlifting, you could take somebody and have them go to a meet in a week. Teach them basics of movement and then have them compete in a week. You wouldn't want to do that, but you could. No barrier to entry there.
Now you also have your USA Triathlon cert, right? Or is track and field or triathlon?
So I did following the triathlon stuff, we had a really strong triathlon community here, and I wanted to kind of explore that option because I had explored weightlifting for a while, and I was looking for something different.
Just diversification.
Yeah, so I got my USA Triathlon cert and my USA Cycling cert. So I'm USA T and USA Cycling certified, and I did that. That was actually a really cool seminar because it was one of the few that they run. They run these every year, but they run a very few of them where it's a tandem certification because cycling is a huge part of triathlon. So I went out to Colorado Springs to the headquarters there.
This is the summer before the pandemic, right? Yeah, 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
So I went out there for my USA Triathlon, USA Cycling cert. It was really good. Got to work with a lot of the people, a lot of the high level cyclists, high level triathlon coaches, and just triathletes in general for a good 2-3 days there, and went through all that stuff and got that certification as well. That was probably one of the better certifications I've been to. That's just like a weekend course. That was a lot of fun. That was a really good one.
And it's Colorado.
And it's Colorado too. So, and I had a Jeep. It was a really nice Jeep.
Nice.
So yeah.
So since then, obviously the pandemic has gotten in the way a little bit of our kind of coaching continuing ed. There's been some online options and whatnot, but you're actually doing a course right now that is very kind of unconventional I would say at least in the U.S. And in the more specifically in the CrossFit space. Tell us a little bit about that, and kind of what you've learned so far, because it's currently in process.
Yeah. So
we're 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in.
Yeah, 4 weeks in. This will be the 4th week
out of 10.
Yeah, thereabouts. It's bookended by like 2 open weeks, so it's really 14 weeks, but it's like the core material is 10 weeks long. So where you're working with people. So the course that I'm in right now is so it's hard to explain, because this stuff it's definitely more of like a higher level sports science course. There's a lot of biomechanics stuff that you could consider that in there. Coaching approaches, training approaches. There's a lot to it. The general idea is that it's looking at movement and how movement is structured, and how our brain structure movement, how our body structure movement in a very different way. It's if you're familiar with dynamic systems or systems theory, it takes movement theory and the approach to skill development and combines those two. Mm-hmm. So it's very much very much in that vein. There's 2 books that I've read on this already from the guy who's running the course, and the guy who's running the course, his name is Franz Bosch. I'll put his name out there, and you should look it up. He's very, very well credentialed, very, very well respected in the greater community. And then the other guy who's part of this course, his name is Toon. I'm not even going to try to say his last name. They're Dutch. So Franz Bosch is pretty easy. The other guy named Toon, I don't know how to say his last name. It's like Tolmanson, and I'm butchering that. I know I am. But anyway, so they're very well respected in it. Toon is part of the Dutch Olympic Performance Committee or whatever. He's the guy who heads that and organizes all their Olympic teams and athletes in terms of their training. Franz Bosch has worked with countless teams. You can go on his website and look at all the teams that he's worked with. From rugby, football, baseball, basically any athletic program, he's probably worked with it in some capacity. But anyway, so the course itself has me working with 3 other guys from around the world. I'm working with a guy in Germany who's Australian, but he's in Germany, a guy in Kuwait, and then a guy in Melbourne. And the 4 of us kind of work together. We get a problem, and we have to assess movement we have to assess the movement of the person, design exercises that can fix the problem, and then explain how we'd apply it. There's a lot more to that. If anyone wants to talk to me about it, sit down and we can talk for like 3 hours on this. To put it in perspective, the 4 of us, this last module, we spent about 7 or 8 hours analyzing a 4-second clip of an AFL game. And AFL is rugby, Australian Football League. We spent about 7 or 8 hours analyzing a 4-second clip. So that's like the depth at which we're breaking things down. We're going down to the nitty gritty of tendon, force sharing, shearing across what joint. Really, really in-depth stuff and fascinating stuff if you're
into biomechanics.
If you're into biomechanics. The way that scales up, though, because that's a lot of detail. The way that scales up is there's some really key principles that we cover in this and we talk about that are counterintuitive and contradictory to the current paradigms in sports science and the prevailing authorities that be, right? So it's very, very interesting to me in that there's this whole group of people who have a whole nother mindset about how to approach movement and train people. So that's what kind of drew me in the first place and why I started exploring it.
And it sounded like, based on scratching the surface with you last week on this, it was more about just to try to regurgitate that concept, was like not over constraining and allowing the body to kind of find the solution to the mechanical problem on its own.
Yeah.
And then, as opposed to like a more conventional, like linear path to the proper biomechanical way that you think from the coach's eye is right.
Yeah.
It's more about like letting the athlete kind of athlete's body figure itself out, almost because your body in and of itself has some like artificial intelligence biomechanically that it can hone.
Yeah, so I mean, your body evolved to kind of figure itself out, right? I mean, nobody was teaching cavemen how to snatch or you know pick up a heavy rock
or even
off
just
the ground.
squat. Yeah,
right. So how did they figure that out?
Yeah.
You know, nobody taught the caveman how to squat. So, you know, one of the more recent studies that they cited in one of the lectures was, you have these two ideas of these two concepts that they were studying in it, practice versus retention. You know, so what they did was they took two models and they said, okay, you guys are going to, I'm generalizing this study, one group you're going to be told exactly how to do this exercise and we're going to walk you through it. We're going to walk you through it step by step. And then this other group, they said, okay, we have these exercises that require minimal verbal cueing, minimal showing of how to do it. We're going to let you figure out the exercise by seeing it and performing these exercises that we give you. And what they found was that the group that and this study's been repeated, I know, for a number of occasions. I've seen it elsewhere too. But the group where they structure them and they tell them, hey, you need to be at exactly this angle and you need to be here. In a session, like a 45-minute or an hour session, they do incredibly well and they perform the movement very, very well. But if you have them come back in a week and you have them try to perform it again, their performance in that movement is abysmal. Whereas the group that you just let solve on their own, their practice that day is horrendous, but the retention when they come back later and do it massively outperforms the practice group.
interesting.
So basically I'm sure you've all experienced this where you practice something or you're doing something at the gym or wherever, any type of skill, and you're doing terrible at it. And then you come back like a week later and you're like, oh my God, I understand how to do this. I can do it. And you're like markedly better than what you were before. And that's what that study kind of gets at the heart of. And this is one of the things that this model and this concept is kind of getting at, that the best way to improve a high skill or a high intensity movement like jumping, like snatching, like throwing a ball is not necessarily getting the exact step-by-step process and the exact angles that you need to be at in exact positions. It's allowing the body to figure it out for itself.
Right.
The body is going to optimize to the best solution.
Yeah, because everybody's joints and anatomy, lever arms, musculature is completely uniform or completely independent. So like, you're better off letting the body figure it out.
Yeah, and one of the big things that they talk about is this problem called the degrees of freedom problem. I'm sure this pops up in engineering stuff, and you might be able to speak to that better. But the degrees of freedom problem would, and this is the way that they kind of summarize it, is that if you look at your shoulder can, if generally it can abduct, it can adduct, it can flex, it can extend, right? It can circumduct. It has all these degrees of freedom. So your brain has to control all those, right? And that's just one joint. And then now you think about the shoulder joint. It has 3 joints, actually. It can do all those things. So now it's got to manipulate the AC joint, the scap in the back, and the joint between the arm and the shoulder, right? The glenohumeral joint there. And then to do an actual movement, to make actual productive work, it's also got to control the elbow and the wrist, and then all the fingers as well. So the amount of control that your brain has to have is massive. You got to multiply all the way down those numbers, right? So it has to account for all those things. So how does it do that? It can't. So your body solves the solution as it goes down. There's a lot of sub-control elements to the way the body does things. You could design anybody who's ever worked in robotics or done anything like that, trying to solve that problem is very, very hard.
Yeah.
So
it's a reason why robotics has been such a slowly developing industry, right?
Right. So that's one of the big concepts that they'll talk about is how does central control, the brain, right, manipulate the body, and it doesn't. The brain doesn't control a lot of your action.
Right. Well, it's like anytime you try to teach somebody newer how to snatch, the first reaction they'll give you is, man, it's too much to think about. It's like, because you really can't think about it all. You can only really think about one thing at best. And even then, you're not able to really think about it while you're doing it because everything happens so fast.
Right, and this is something that I think has been talked about a lot in coaching, and this is kind of a scientific basis for something that has been known in coaching for a long time, and that intention matters. In that it's not so much understanding the movement specifically. It's like, what do you intend to do? You know, you'll hear in baseball or any throwing sport, you like finish through the throw and point where you want the ball to go. You'll hear that simple cue, and it's like, that's your intention. You want the ball to go there, so point there, right? Don't think about what has to happen.
You're giving the body the directive. You're not telling the body how to do it. You're letting the body do it. Which kind of tailors to genetics and general athleticism and people that kind of have it. Their bodies are just faster at figuring it out, right?
And something we could talk for hours about this. I watched like an hour and 15-minute lecture from these guys last night, and this was one of the coolest things that I heard in it. I'm gonna talk a little bit about this for a second, but the one of the coolest things I heard in it was how so you look around and I had said something like this to you a while ago about we never really think about how we get from point A to point B, right? And when you look around and how much of the surface that you're standing on or walking on a daily basis is completely flat. Right? It's completely flat. There's no variability in it. There's no. Your body has to do almost minimal work to get from point A to point B. And
your house floor is pretty flat. Your gym floor is very flat.
And then if you have to go up an elevation, we have stairs. And it's flat and it's very consistent, right? And so one of the things that this kind of leads to is that you have kids who grow up in an environment that are very devoid of variation. And they're never really trained to deal with a variation in movement. And then years down the road, they end up getting on a football pitch or
even those are flat too, right?
Or even those are flat, and their body isn't used to handling variation in high intensity motion and stuff like that. And you see ACL tears and things like that. There's a whole host of other things that go along with that, and I'm dumbing down a really complicated and really involved conversation. But if you go back and you look at how things used to be, there was no manicured things that people walked over, so they were constantly having to adjust and shift their weight and change how they moved, so there was a lot more strength in how they walked. There was a lot more variability in what they had to do to get from point A to point B, and so that's part of this conversation too. It's like, how can you build more robust people, and how can you build more robust athletes in the context that we're talking about, at least as athletes?
And a simple kind of application of that is like hike. Go hiking either 20 minutes on the weekend or 20 minutes on a weekday evening, or a couple hours on a weekend. Like, go hiking. Have anecdotal experience with people that have knee pain that start to hike, and suddenly the knee pain goes away because now they're introducing all sorts of variation to kind of bring more awareness to their movement patterns, and the body figures it out.
So I'll make my plug for cross country because cross country running. So I will say the reason why I can run a marathon in no bowls is because I ran cross country, and I was in the woods jumping around roots and running over things and having to shift my weight in weird ways that you don't get from track and field, that you don't get from running on the road.
Right.
And so I feel the reason why I have such a robust foot, ankle, knee is because of what I did when I was growing up.
Very relevant anecdote here. I just ran my first half marathon last weekend, 2 weekends ago, and
2 weekends ago.
2 weeks ago now, and a bunch of people from Round Lake did it too. Zephyr was one of them. Zephyr he did the Ultra Beast with you guys back in 2019.
He didn't do it with us. He carried us.
He carried you guys.
He threw me on his back and carried me up the mountain.
And then he does a lot of Spartan work and a lot of trail running, and he did this half. He said he felt really good about it, doing it. He said he felt pretty good doing it. He said he felt like he had the go, he had the push, especially at the end. He had gas left in the tank that he could push on. But one of the comments he made was, and I'm paraphrasing here, was just that the repetitive, kind of pounding and almost like physical monotony of the half was the hardest thing for him to deal with. From a stimulus standpoint. And it's because he's so much more used to dipping and dodging and kind of having to figure it out on the trail. When you suddenly have to do that on the road, and you take all that uncertainty out of the equation, repeatability is not necessarily a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and we've had discussions about this before with movement.
Yeah.
There are very few movements that are bad for you to do,
Mm-hmm.
but almost any movement that you do too much of is going to be bad for you.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why variance, and in the CrossFit world, we subscribe to constantly varied. That's why we believe very strongly in one of the key elements of the CrossFit model, which is constantly varied. Like
Right.
the work, the movements, the nature of which, and we could even be better. Like, I hate to say this, but Jillian Michaels is a little bit right. We do resort to a lot of the same movements from week to week. You see
The only thing she's right in.
I know, and I say that with a very, very, very cautious tone, because the greater sentiment of what she's saying is wrong. But we do come back to things like handstand push-ups and toes to bar, because those are kind of like I don't know. Those are milestone like movements that people like to get better at. And they do need some linear progression to get better at them,
Right.
relatively orderly way,
Right.
without risking injury as much. So, but you'll notice, I mean, like what we did last week or Monday this week,
Yeah.
when we had the wild ass movements of the banded kettlebell press and the single arm pull up and the windmill. Those are not unconventional movements, and those are true variants when it comes to mixing up what we do on a day-to-day basis. We could have just done a regular kettlebell press or dumbbell press, but the variance that your body experienced and what you had to go through to figure that out is really good for your overall mechanics and orthopedic health.
Right, yeah, totally, and that's the goal. Like I have a lot of you have heard me say this before, that I have a lot of grievances in terms of like the way CrossFit does things, but at the same time, CrossFit is the best model, in my opinion, out there for bringing this type of fitness and this type of training to a
masses,
to a group of people. It's the best model, in my opinion.
There are more optimal ways to train people on an individual or even small group basis, but that's not really what we kind of traffic in as much, right?
And it's not scalable. It makes it, if you're only working on an individual model, it's not accessible.
Yeah, right. Because there are only so many coaches to go around.
There's only so many coaches to go around. And I know from working with athletes in terms of weightlifting and triathlon, there's only so many athletes that you can handle at once.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing one-on-one, that's really what you're doing. You're working with an athlete. You're working with an individual, because the amount of detail that you have to put into that person.
Yeah.
And CrossFit is the best model for that. And not trying to make this a sales pitch about CrossFit, but CrossFit has those elements. And this course that I'm taking right now, when I first read this guy's books, Franz Bosch's books, it was like a light bulb moment, because CrossFit had always CrossFit claims to be backed by science, and to some degree they are, but they do a horrendous job at like citing where they get their stuff from, right? Greg Glassman just kind of read some books and was like, yeah, this looks like science, I'm going to throw it in a book together. And he never really says where he got it from. And I'm not saying that what he put in there is wrong, because it is right. There is a scientific backing for a lot of things he says, but there's some elements of it that never really had that buy-in from the exercise science, sports physio community before.
Well, and a lot of them are presented in a very objective way too.
Yeah, and in a very subjective way is how he puts these things. These books that Franz Bosch started putting out, coming at it from a systems theory point of view, for lack of a better put it, a chaos theory point of view, where chaos rules, variety rules, right? Mm-hmm. This is the CrossFit model, and this is the scientific basis for it. And he really presents it in a way that makes sense to me, and explains a lot of the things that CrossFit presented years ago. And CrossFit, it's not new. What CrossFit presents is not new. These things have been known for a while, but it's just now that the science is catching up with these concepts.
And the application and delivery of it in a group setting is really the novel part about CrossFit. Right?
Yeah, and that's the concepts that CrossFit bases themselves on are not novel. They've been around forever. I can show you books from the 70s and 80s that have the same exact workouts that we're doing now. It's just CrossFit branded it and packaged it in a way that's very consumable by everybody. Mm-hmm. The practitioners who are actually teaching
also
it,
created
and
a system
members.
to train people and to get to make it even more scalable.
Right. You can't teach everybody like you do the tip of the spear.
Yeah.
The athlete that's going to the Olympics needs something. It's like Greg Glassman's got a great quote about it. The needs of the Olympian and the grandma differ by what does he say?
Aevian.
Varian.
I know what quote you're
Something
talking about.
it's yeah. Anyways, it's a really good quote. If you look it up, you just look up Greg Glassman, Olympian.
It's degree, not in.
Yeah, degree, not in kind.
Yeah, they vary in degree, not in kind. So the needs are similar, but they are on different degrees. Right?
Different degrees, yeah. So the Olympian cleans 400 pounds. The grandma cleans a 15-pound bar.
Yeah, right.
So they
And
can both do
both-
the movement.
yeah.
They both should be doing the movement, the variation, but they need to do it in a different.
Well, and
intensity.
another source of constantly varied in its application and its legitimacy is if you look at like Louis Simmons at Westside Barbell, the Westside method is very dependent upon week-to-week variation in what they're maxing out on, and they
Right.
max out on almost a different lift every week, right?
Right.
And because of that, they're able to it comes back to that principle I just mentioned. They're like, squatting is not bad for you. Squatting too much, too often is bad for you,
Yeah,
right?
frequency and volume of squatting is too much.
Right.
Yeah, and Louis Simmons got his stuff from the Russians, and the Russians are like they're the guys for
Yeah.
sports science and exercise science,
Right.
which is funny because that's a whole nother ball of wax. We don't have time to get into it right now
Yeah.
because we were
Well, let's take it. Let's take the because where you're headed is actually where in this conversation is actually where we're headed. I think from a kind of overall impact. Like the thing that we all should be asking ourselves is what are we bringing to the world? What are we offering up to help the problems that are at hand? And I think COVID has highlighted a lot of things in not only society but also the medical system. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about is how do we move towards a more medically oriented establishment that can help people that are coming from, like, let's say a doctor who says, listen, you need to get on some sort of fitness protocol to change kind of the nature of your life and the course of your health over time. Because right now, the doctors are just going to tell you, you need to start exercising. And it stops there, right?
Yeah.
And then it's on the individual to go decide, to go figure out what are my options, what should I do? And generally, most people just go choose the thing that they dislike the least, right? Like, oh, I don't mind running, I'll start running, or I want to walk, or I'm going to swim, or maybe I'll try this crazy thing called CrossFit, and that's like a 5% at most of the population that's willing to come to that conclusion. But the idea that we've been talking a lot about is like, how do we bridge the gap and be part of the kind of the wellness solution to the main kind of problem here? And a lot of people in CrossFit, and you and I talked a bit about this beforehand, kind of hang the current CrossFit model on a pedestal as the way to fix the problem. And the truth of the matter is, CrossFit is not for everybody. And I 100% believe that. Anybody can do it, but it is not for everybody. I know that's kind of sounds like a contradiction, but the idea that we're trying to kind of move towards is understanding the bigger scope of the problem. And this is where your education is headed, more towards public health, right? Like, from a policy standpoint, how do we incentivize and how do we create structure to reward this kind of behavior, these kind of decisions, so that the system doesn't get as bogged down with sickness as it currently is. And so you're right now you're going to school, but you have plans for even more school. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'm in school right now. I originally started going back to school back in 2019, right around that time, and fall of 2019, and with the goal of we're starting to move the needle in terms of what I know from here towards public health and community health and things of that nature, and that's still the goal. And so I started going to school for that. I go to SUNY Empire. If anybody's looking for a great school to go to SUNY Empire. It's very, very, very accommodating, especially towards people who are in the workforce or looking to further their education in some way, shape, or form, or change educational paths. But anyway, so I started going to school there for community health, public health. You can generally summarize it as that. Picked up a lot of things along the way that
that I knew anecdotally or knew just in passing from reading the news, reading articles, but really it's been a deep dive in a lot of the problems and how deep they really are in terms of our society and stuff like that. And the majority of my course load that I've taken has been in sociology, psychology, and then policy. So really dealing with the human element of the healthcare issue. Because prior to this, I had done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of stuff with anatomy and physiology. We didn't mention this earlier, but I have my license in massage therapy. I went and did that. And even before that, when I initially got out of the Navy, I was on track for. My plan was to go to school for physical therapy. So I was taking a bunch of courses in that vein.
And LMT is a pretty rigorous thing to go through too. It's not something that a lot of people are willing to go through. Especially while they're doing something else while they're working, right?
Yeah, so I figured I have the micro side of things, the individualist side of things, and the biological side of things, so to speak. Let's look at how these things can apply in a greater scope and in the greater scope, in the greater scheme of things, and how that can benefit people at the policy level. And so I started going to school for that. Working on different things. Developing my ideas about how things should look based off my background, and at this point I started looking at grad schools, talking to MPH programs, so Master of Public Health programs, looking to get into those type of programs. Talked with many different schools about their programs, and awesome. There's some great ones. UAlbany is a great program. They have a lot of good things. But somewhere along the way, I came across the idea of doing a MD, so a medical doctor, and an MPH. Because the fact of the matter is that there's not a lot of people who can bridge the gap between what's done on the practical side of things and what's done behind a desk. And
for policy's sake.
Right, for policy's sake, economic sake, there's not a lot of people who do that. There's policy wonks and medical doctors don't ever cross paths.
Right.
People who understand the economics and the sociological impact of it are not really conversing with the doctor who's in the ER, seeing the person who's in diabetic shock, right? So there's very few people who cross that line, and the ones that do are out there trying to do the best they can, but they don't have a very loud voice because there's not a lot of them. So my
and how many of them come into that situation? The ones that do exist come into that seat with a lot of practical real world experience in the health spectrum.
Yeah, and so that's my question, and a lot of stuff that I've been learning and figuring out along the way has kind of guided me and directed me in this. And if anybody knows more about this or knows things about this, please come talk to me, because I want to hear, because I'm pushing towards this, and this is where I want to go with it, and I want to hear if you work as a healthcare practitioner and you know stuff about this, or you have experience in the public health realm, or you don't but you have ideas about it, come talk to me about it, because this is what I want to do and this is what I want to hear. Anyways, long story short, that's the next step for me, is finishing out this program that I'm in right now to look at public health and community health as an undergrad, and then go into MD, MPH, medical doctor, master of public health. Bridging that gap, trying to bridge that gap between policy and actual healthcare, not just what's written down in a book or paper somewhere.
So like I said up front, for the guy who didn't like school.
Well, okay, so it's not that I don't like school. Here's the thing, it's not that I don't like school. I like learning. I have a real problem with institutions. And so I will not name names here, but I recently reached out to an institution to inquire about their program, and I was promptly told that you have to matriculate before we'll even talk to you. And I do not like that institutionalized elitist mentality.
Yeah.
And I do not like standardized approaches to education.
Yeah, a lot of that is part of the problem, right?
Right. We won't talk to you because you're not part of us yet.
Yeah.
You haven't done it yet.
It's a pay-to-play scenario.
Anyways, so needless to say, that is I circled my way around and came in the back door and got what I needed from that institution.
Yeah.
I went behind that person who told me that and figured it out. So, yeah. So, anyways, I don't enjoy that, and that's why I do not like
that.
But
aspect
you're
of
definitely.
education.
It seems like this is true to who you are and what you want to do in the sense of continuing education and being part of solving a bigger problem.
Right.
It's a daunting problem, and it's one that you and I have had a lot of frustrating conversations about the implications of having making any real progress in. It's a real daunting place to try to make a living and not just not make a living, but have a real impact. Right. Because you're kind of fighting a lot of that institutional attitude, right?
Yeah, certainly.
But the reason why this is cool is because now all these people know that, and hopefully, a couple of them are going to come to you and say like, "Hey, here's an idea," or "Hey, maybe you should talk to this person." Like, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, is to just kind of get these discussions going, and to inform you guys, the members, that our coaches are doing a lot more behind the scenes than just writing workouts, which Sam happens to do. Sam does write the programming. He and I usually meet on it every week to go over some cliff notes, and I'm usually trying to make a case for like, hey, let's put some muscle ups in over here, or let's put some handstand
I don't
push-ups
do a lot
in
of
over-
muscle ups, do I?
Yeah.
We haven't done ring muscle ups.
We do need to put some ring in. Oh, we did bar 2 weeks ago.
I do bar more because bar is, I think, more accessible to
It
more
is. It
people.
is more accessible, and the scaling kind of makes more sense. But
Rings are hard to scale. Rings are a pain to scale.
hey, we've had tons of toes to bar, so I have no complaints on toes to bar.
I like toast bar.
Yeah. So Sam does. So it's good for you guys to know that Sam doing the programming with this huge subset of experience in not only CrossFit but also different sports, different strength and conditioning sports, and also this kind of greater perspective on an agenda moving towards public health that makes for a really dangerous, in a good way, really dangerous skill set to be writing a group GPP program, because he's considering a lot of things when putting these workouts up for you guys. It's not as easy as you think. A lot of people think it's just like, hey, just pick some stuff and throw it on paper and let's go. But I trust that Sam takes more care writing the programming than I would warrant anybody that I know has the ability to do. So I think you guys should take a lot of comfort and pride in that, and that's what you guys are getting, and hopefully reaping the rewards and the benefits from it, not just now but many years to come. We blew through our time limit here, but
Shocking.
yeah, we knew that. I was hoping we would keep it. We said, what did you say, 45 minutes? We're over an hour now.
It's okay.
I think we were about 20 minutes per, like pre-CrossFit, and then post-CrossFit.
I would put some timestamps in here.
Yeah, we'll throw some timestamps in.
If you want to skip us reliving all the CrossFit glory days, then
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
the important
yeah.
stuff here.
Moving forward, we're going to do this again. I don't know if we'll do a Meet the Coach episode next. We'll probably do, I was thinking just like a general training talk.
Sure.
With some things, just like general training best practices. Like even I was thinking about today, like talking about who should be wearing wrist wraps in the gym and for what should you be wearing them for. Like overhead squats is a good day to maybe have the wrist wraps on.
Yeah,
And
if you guys have any, if the members have any topics they want to hear about, please let us know, because we can, I can talk forever about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And nobody comes to ask me, so I'm assuming you guys just know everything and you don't want to, I'm assuming that, so.
Yeah. Which is bad assumption.
Not that you don't want to hear me talk, because I know you guys want to hear me talk, you just know everything, so.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. We don't want to spend this kind of time talking in class because we can't. And but we know some of you may want to hear more from us. This is another reason why we're doing this. So give us some feedback. Let us know what you guys think. And like Sam said, topics, questions, things that you want to hear going forward, just let us know.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, guys.